I still remember the exact moment the first red flag waved in my face. It was a crisp October evening in Chicago, the kind where the air smells like wood smoke and coffee shops spill warm light onto the sidewalks. I was curled up on the couch with my fiancé, Ryan. We'd been engaged for 3 months, and our wedding date, June 10th, was already circled on every calendar in my apartment. "Have you talked to your mom about the rehearsal dinner yet?" I asked, scrolling through Pinterest for centerpiece ideas. Ryan stiffened. Not a big, obvious flinch, just a subtle tightening of his jaw. "My parents won't be coming," he said, eyes glued to the TV. I laughed, thinking he was joking. "Yeah, right. They're your parents. Of course they're coming." He muted the game and finally looked at me. "No, seriously, they don't do weddings. It's complicated," I blinked. "Complicated how?" "They're private people. They don't like big events. Trust me, it's better this way." Something about the way he said it, quick, final, like a door slamming, sent a shiver down my spine. I'd never met his parents in the 2 years we'd been together. He always had an excuse. They lived out of state, they were traveling, they were sick. And I'd believed him, because love makes you swallow doubts like bitter pills. But that night, as he turned back to the TV, I felt a spark of something sharp and cold inside me. Curiosity, suspicion, maybe even the first flicker of revenge, though I wouldn't name it that yet. Over the next few weeks, my unease grew like a shadow at dusk. Whenever I brought up his family, Ryan's answers were clipped. He changed the subject, kissed my forehead, distracted me with wedding plans. Friends told me not to worry, some families are just weird. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The breaking point came on a snowy Thursday in November. I was at work, nursing my 3rd cup of bad office coffee, when an email from Ryan popped up. "Running late tonight. Don't wait for me for dinner." No big deal. Until I saw the timestamp on his last credit card notification later that night. A charge at an upscale steakhouse. For 2. My chest tightened. I called him. No answer. Texted. Nothing. By midnight, he still wasn't home. When he finally stumbled in around 1 a.m., smelling faintly of whiskey and expensive cologne, I asked who he'd had dinner with. "Client meeting," he said too fast. "Which client? Does it matter?" He dropped his coat, his eyes hard. "You don't have to know every detail of my life, Emily." The way he said my name, sharp, almost mocking, made my stomach flip. I'd always been Emily to him. Sweet Emily, trusting Emily. But that night, I decided to be someone else. I decided to be dangerous Emily. While Ryan slept, I sat in the glow of my laptop and dug. I started with the steakhouse's Instagram page, scrolling through tagged photos. At 9:17 p.m., there it was. A grainy picture of Ryan, unmistakable in his navy suit, sitting across from a woman I didn't recognize. She was laughing, her hand on his. The caption read, "Late night deal making." Tagged with a name I didn't know. Clara Weston. My heart pounded as I clicked through Clara's profile. Public, thank God. Pictures of her at charity events, brunch with friends, and, my breath caught, a photo from last summer. Ryan was in the background, arm draped casually around her shoulders. But that wasn't the worst part. In the comments of another photo, Clara had replied to a friend, "Can't wait for the family reunion next month. Mom and Dad are so excited to meet everyone again." Mom and Dad, parents. Something clicked so loudly in my head I swear I heard it. Ryan wasn't hiding his parents from me. He was hiding me from his parents. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, I'd made a decision. If Ryan wanted secrets, I'd give him secrets of my own. I would find his parents. I would look them in the eye. And when I uncovered whatever he was hiding, I'd make sure he regretted every single lie. I wasn't sure yet what revenge would look like, but I knew it would be beautiful. I pretended to be calm at work, answering emails and smiling at coworkers, but inside I was a humming wire of plans. The thing about being betrayed is it rewires you. You stop waiting for someone else to fix what they broke. You start collecting evidence like you used to collect stamps. Meticulous, patient, certain you'd finish the album. First, I wanted to know everything. Where Ryan's parents lived, what they did, why Ryan would say they wouldn't be at the wedding instead of, the honest thing, we're not invited. So I spent my lunch break playing amateur detective. I pulled up Clara Weston's tagged photos again, scrolling until I found the reunion post. The comments had a location tag: Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. A narrow lead, but it was something. Lake Geneva was a 3-hour drive from Chicago. And though my first instinct was to book a last-minute weekend trip and show up unannounced, because revenge feels best with surprise, I knew subtlety would get me farther. I needed to be welcomed. I needed photos and names, snippets of conversation I could use later when I wanted to pry something loose. So I started the long, slow work, building access. Step 1, become someone who belonged. I made a fake profile. Not malicious, just curated. An art world grad named Hannah Carter who ran a boutique event planning business. She was charming, a little fashionable, and her Instagram had just enough curated brunches and tabletop shots to be believable. I wrote a note in the bio about being available for private estate events, and because people always fall for a little prestige, I tagged a couple of upscale venues in Chicago and Lake Geneva. Creating Hannah took me longer than it should have. I agonized over each profile photo, each caption. It felt like building a new self out of pixels and borrowed backstory, and for the first time since the wedding ring went on my finger, I enjoyed the control. Once Hannah existed, I let her loose. I followed Clara. I liked a few tasteful pictures. I commented on a charity post, "Love what your organization is doing," and waited. The internet is a small town, and people who live in public love to be seen. Within 48 hours, Clara followed back. She sent a direct message. "Thanks for the support, Hannah. Are you local? We host a small summer get-together at my parents' house. An intimate thing, but we're always looking for people who can help with linens, cocktails." I almost squealed. This was the moment I'd fantasized about at 2 a.m., while Ryan snoozed on the couch. The perfect opening. I wrote back like I'd been writing back for months. Warm, professional, just a touch effervescent. "I'm local and would love to help. I specialize in intimate estate events." I suggested meeting for coffee to discuss ideas. Clara accepted immediately. She sent me an address that sounded like money. A historic home on the edge of town. Big hedges, white columns. Her tone was light, like she had a trust fund she'd never learned how to spend. In her photos, she always leaned a little too close to people, laughed with precise teeth. She gave off the kind of privilege that thinks kindness is a performance. The day I met Clara in person, I dressed like the part. Neutral blazer, hair pulled back, a portfolio that looked heavy with client lists. I drove up the long drive and parked in a gravel pull-off. The house was everything the photos suggested. Grand but slightly tired. Like someone had stopped dusting the corners properly when new money moved in, and everyone pretended it was deliberate. Clara met me on the porch with a chamomile iced tea. Up close, she was softer than her Instagram, less stage, more human. Maybe it was a kindness of manner, or maybe she used her warmth like a mask. She hugged me like we'd been friends for years. "Oh my God, the images on your page are gorgeous, Hannah," she said, leading me through a foyer lined with family portraits. "My mom, Evelyn, will love your aesthetic, Evelyn." There it was, my first real name. The house smelled faintly of lavender and lemon oil. As we walked, I stole glances at plaques, books, small trophies. There were framed invitations on a foyer table, the Westons in Paris 2019. A paper program from some gala with Evelyn Weston listed as a donor. The family had money and social capital, and Ryan had lied about them not attending a wedding. Rage bubbled under my polite smile. Clara gave me a tour. The sunroom where they entertained, the library with books stacked by color, the back lawn that led to a small private pier on the lake. She talked about the family reunion like it was a holiday movie. Everyone brings a dish. Grandma brings lemon squares. We all sit under the oak. She mentioned casually that her parents had been married 42 years. and that they loved tradition, like matching napkins and monogrammed something or other. She didn't say we would love to meet you, but the implication hung in the air, heavy and obvious. When we settled into the sunroom with our tea, I asked the question that had started it all. Does Ryan ever come here? With a girlfriend? He mentioned his parents sometimes, but I don't think he's ever introduced me. Clara's expression shifted. For a beat, she was startled, like someone had dropped ice water on her. Then she smiled that practiced smile. Ryan? Of course he's been here. He's family. He usually comes with someone, but sometimes he... She stopped, searching for the right phrasing. He's always been a little private about his relationships. You know how some people are. Inside, my fists curled reflexively. Outside, my voice stayed soft. I asked him once if I could meet them. He told me they'd never come to the wedding. Clara's eyes widened, candid now. He said that? He would say that? She shook her head before she could stop herself. That's strange. My parents adore him. Evelyn is always laughing about Ryan's college stories. He practically grew up here. That was the admission I needed. Ryan had lied outright. The lie wasn't just to hide an affair. It was to hide me. I felt the edges of humiliation and fury braid together into a rope of purpose. Standing in that sunroom, with sunlight making dust motes look like tiny planets, I made a new decision. I was going to be the person who could not be ignored. If it's okay, Clara, I said, tilting my head like a co-conspirator, I'd love to help with the reunion. I know small events. I can make the napkins match. I can make the lemon squares taste like Grandma's. She brightened, and in that warmth there was access. Would you? Oh, yes. Evelyn will be thrilled. We're a little understaffed this year. We traded numbers, then social handles, all the while my mind was cataloging everything, names, cues, possible witnesses. Before I left, Clara walked me to the car and, as women do, asked about my life. I told her I ran a boutique business. I didn't say I was engaged. Ryan wouldn't suspect a thing. So I lied with precision. Driving home through the last orange of autumn, I felt the plan coalesce. Go to Lake Geneva as Hannah. Charm the parents in town. Learn what Ryan was hiding. If family secrets were the currency, I was about to become deeply wealthy. That night, back in the bed Ryan shared with me, I studied his face as he slept. He looked ordinary. Hair a mess, mouth slack. There was no guilt on it, just the comfortable arrogance of a man who thinks he can keep two lives separate like two rooms in a house. I touched my ring and thought about Hannah's portfolio and napkins and lemon squares. If he'd wanted secrecy, fine. I'd give him secrecy plus a slow, precise unmasking. Revenge, I decided, would not be a scream. It would be a performance. I'd become indispensable to the people who had been hidden from me. I'd enter their lives like sunlight through a cracked window, gentle at first, then impossible to ignore. And when the moment came, when I had all the names and the receipts and the pictures, I'd let the truth land like a mirror. For now, though, I had to be patient, because the best kind of revenge is the kind you can taste first. It tastes like lemon sugar, tart, sweet, and bright enough to wake you up. By December, Lake Geneva felt like a second home, at least to the version of me named Hannah Carter. Every Friday evening after work, I'd pack a weekender bag and drive north, the highway lights blurring past as I rehearsed my smile in the rearview mirror. Ryan thought I was picking up extra wedding planning gigs to save money. Technically, I wasn't lying. Clara welcomed me like an old friend. She looped me into group texts about decor and music for the reunion, introduced me to her cousins on FaceTime, even added me to the private Weston family WhatsApp group. Each ding of my phone was another door swinging open. And inside those doors, secrets spilled like cheap wine. I learned that Evelyn and Thomas Weston, Ryan's parents, were a beloved Lake Geneva couple, known for their extravagant 4th of July parties and charitable donations. Their lives were practically a catalog of small-town prestige. They weren't reclusive at all. In fact, they were the opposite, social butterflies with money to burn. And they adored Ryan. He'd grown up spending summers at the lake house, helping his dad restore vintage boats, fishing with his mom before sunrise. Every time I absorbed a new detail, a fresh wave of anger rolled through me. Ryan had told me his parents were private people who don't do weddings, when in reality, they probably would have hired a brass band if he asked. The lie wasn't just protective, it was intentional. He'd erased me from a family narrative that clearly mattered to him. Meanwhile, at home in Chicago, Ryan played the part of loving fiancé. He texted me memes, kissed my forehead when I came back late Sunday nights, and talked about honeymoon destinations like nothing was amiss. I perfected the art of compartmentalization, smiling through dinners while secretly scrolling through Weston family threads beneath the table. If he sensed a shift, he didn't show it. Maybe he thought my distance was just wedding stress. Maybe he didn't care. 2 weeks before Christmas, Clara invited me to a small pre-reunion planning dinner at the lake house. "Just family," she said casually. "But you're basically family now." My heart pounded as I typed my reply. "Would love to." The night of the dinner, the house glowed with strings of white lights. Snow clung to the porch railings like frosting. Clara greeted me with a hug, pulling me into a hallway fragrant with cinnamon and pine. And there, by the fireplace, stood Evelyn and Thomas Weston. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. They were older than I expected, elegant but approachable. Evelyn wore a deep green sweater, her silver hair swept into a chignon. Thomas had the sturdy posture of someone who still sailed every weekend. When Clara introduced me as Hannah, their smiles were instant and warm. "We've heard so much about you," Evelyn said, pressing my hands in hers. "Clara says you're saving the reunion." "Just trying to make it beautiful," I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline roaring in my ears. As the evening unfolded, I found myself drawn in by their genuine kindness. We shared wine and stories, laughter echoing against the high ceilings. Evelyn asked about my business, and I spun easy half-truths about event planning. Thomas regaled us with tales of Ryan as a boy, how he'd once capsized a sailboat during a summer storm and swam half a mile to shore, soaked and laughing. Every anecdote was another cut. Ryan wasn't estranged from his parents. He was cherished, and they clearly believed he was single. When Evelyn mentioned how much she wished Ryan would bring someone special this year, my chest tightened so sharply I nearly dropped my glass. Later, while Clara and her cousins debated catering menus, I slipped away to the powder room and steadied myself in the mirror. My reflection looked calm, almost serene, but inside a storm gathered. This wasn't just about curiosity anymore. Ryan hadn't simply lied. He'd built a parallel life. I wasn't part of his family story, not even in footnotes. Driving back to Chicago that night, the snow glittered under the moon like scattered diamonds. My breath fogged the windshield as plans formed in my mind. If Ryan wanted to keep me hidden, I'd do the opposite. I'd weave myself so deeply into his family's reunion that when I revealed who I truly was, the shock would reverberate through every corner of his carefully constructed world. The next morning, Ryan brewed coffee and asked if I'd help finalize our wedding guest list. He was cheerful, almost boyish, like nothing in the universe was wrong. I studied him over the rim of my mug. The man across from me was a stranger wearing my fiancé's face. "Sure," I said, smiling so sweetly it hurt my cheeks. That weekend, I returned to Lake Geneva to help Clara finalize decorations. We spent hours stringing lights along the boathouse, arranging centerpieces of evergreen and white roses. Evelyn joined us, chatting easily, occasionally asking if I had someone special of my own. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Instead, I said lightly, "Not at the moment. Too busy with work." When I left that evening, Evelyn pressed a tin of homemade cookies into my hands. "You're family now, Hannah," she said warmly. "You must join us for the reunion dinner. Christmas Eve, 6 o'clock. Family. I drove home in silence, the tin of cookies on the passenger seat like a sacred offering. The plan that had been a shadow in my mind now stood fully formed in the light. I would attend that Christmas Eve dinner as Hannah, and when Ryan arrived, because of course he would, I'd be waiting. Revenge wouldn't be a screaming confrontation. It would be slow and surgical, a public unmasking. I'd watch his perfect world crumble in the glow of holiday lights, while his parents, my new allies, witnessed every moment. For the next week, I lived a double life with effortless precision. At work, I wrapped up year-end reports. At home, I played the devoted fiancé, discussing floral arrangements and cake tastings with Ryan. In Lake Geneva, I was Hannah, the poised event planner who Evelyn now trusted enough to text about napkin colors. On Christmas Eve, as the sun dipped behind a horizon dusted with snow, I dressed carefully. A soft burgundy dress, pearl earrings, hair in a low twist, classy but understated. In my purse, I carried only my phone and a quiet, simmering resolve. When I arrived at the Weston house, the driveway glittered with fairy lights. Laughter and music floated through the crisp air. Clara hugged me first, then Evelyn, who exclaimed, "Oh, Hannah, you look stunning." Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon, pine, and roasted turkey. I blended easily among the guests, chatting, laughing, sipping mulled wine. I felt almost giddy, until the front door opened. Ryan stepped inside. The world slowed. He wore a charcoal coat dusted with snow, his hair damp from the cold. He looked around, smiling at familiar faces, until his eyes found mine. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered across his face. Then shock. Then something darker. I smiled, calm and radiant. "Merry Christmas, Ryan," I said softly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The room seemed to hold its breath. This was only the beginning. For a split second, the room froze. The Weston family chatter dimmed, like someone had lowered the volume on a stereo. I stood near the mantel, wineglass poised, watching Ryan's expression flicker from shock to panic to something I couldn't quite name. "Emily," he whispered. But the name was barely audible over the hum of Christmas music. I tilted my head, smiling with all the sweetness I could muster. "I go by Hannah here," I said lightly, letting the words slice through the warm, pine-scented air. Clara turned toward me, her brow knitting. "Wait, Hannah?" she asked, confused. I set my glass down carefully, every movement deliberate. "Yes, that's my middle name," I said, loud enough for Evelyn and Thomas to hear. "Ryan never mentioned me?" Evelyn blinked. "Mentioned you, as in—" She looked between us, puzzled. Ryan stepped forward quickly, his voice tight. "Mom, Dad, this isn't—" I raised a hand, cutting him off. "I'm his fiancé. We've been engaged for 6 months. And until about 5 minutes ago, I thought you didn't exist in his wedding plans." The silence was immediate and heavy. Clara's mouth fell open. Thomas, ever the gracious host, recovered first. "Ryan," he said, calm but firm. "What's going on here?" Ryan's jaw worked, like he was searching for the right lie. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, letting the word hang like smoke. "You told me your parents wouldn't attend our wedding. That they don't like big events. That they wanted no part of it. Yet here they are, hosting the most elegant Christmas gathering I've ever seen." Evelyn's eyes widened, her voice sharp now. "You said what to her?" Ryan flinched. He reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Emily—" "No," my voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare say my name like you still own it." The guests, cousins, aunts, uncles, stood frozen, a living gallery of stunned faces. The crackle of the fireplace was the only sound. Evelyn turned fully to her son. "Ryan, you told us you were single. You said you were focusing on work. You—" She stopped, words colliding with disbelief. Thomas's face darkened, the calm patriarch replaced by something colder. "You lied to all of us?" Ryan's hands trembled. I was trying to protect everyone. "It's not—" I cut in again, my voice icy. "Protect who? Yourself? From what? Commitment? Honesty?" The tension broke into a dozen murmurs. Clara covered her mouth with her hand, eyes darting between us. A cousin whispered to another, their heads bent like conspirators at a play. Evelyn, though, held her ground. "Ryan Alexander Weston," she said, each name a strike of thunder. "Explain. Now." Ryan looked at me, pleading. Emily, can we talk privately? No, I said, clear and calm. Not anymore. I turned to Evelyn and Thomas, drawing a steady breath. I came here under a different name because your son refused to let me meet you. He told me you wouldn't attend our wedding. I had to find out the truth myself. And now, here we are. The room pulsed with shock. Evelyn's face softened as she stepped closer to me. Emily, is it? I am so sorry you were put in this position, Thomas nodded gravely. This is unacceptable, Ryan's voice cracked. I just wanted one part of my life to stay simple. You don't know what it's like, simple? I laughed, sharp and bitter. Lying to two families, living two lives. Does that sound simple to you? I pulled the engagement ring from my finger, holding it up for all to see. The diamond caught the light, throwing tiny sparks against the wall. This was supposed to mean something, I said. But it's just glass when the truth is a lie. I set the ring carefully on the mantel, the soft clink echoing louder than a scream. For a long moment, no one spoke. Snow tapped softly against the windows like a gentle audience applause. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. Ryan, you need to leave, now. He stared at his mother, stunned. Mom, now, she repeated, her voice steel. Thomas moved to the door, holding it open with quiet authority. Ryan's gaze darted to me one last time, a mixture of fury and regret flashing in his eyes. Then he stepped out into the cold night, the door clicking shut behind him. The house exhaled. I stood there, heart racing, half expecting someone to scold me. Instead, Evelyn placed a hand on my shoulder. Emily, she said softly, thank you for coming. For telling us the truth. I can only imagine how hard this has been. Clara reached for my hand. I can't believe he did this. To both of us. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Believe it, I said quietly. But I won't let it define me. For the next hour, the family enveloped me with unexpected warmth. They asked gentle questions, offered hot cider, reassured me I wasn't alone. It was surreal, being comforted by the very people Ryan had tried to keep from me. Later, as I stepped outside into the crisp night, snowflakes swirling under the porch light, I felt the first real exhale of freedom. My revenge hadn't been screaming or breaking things. It was truth, revealed in the one place Ryan thought he controlled. As I walked to my car, Evelyn called after me. Emily, please stay in touch. You're always welcome here. I smiled, the cold air biting at my cheeks. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. I just might. When I slid behind the wheel, I glanced back at the warm glow of the Weston home. Ryan's shadow was nowhere to be seen. For the first time in months, I felt beautifully in control. But as I started the engine and the snow-dusted road stretched ahead, one thought lingered like a final note of a song. This wasn't the end. Not yet. The drive back to Chicago was a blur of headlights and swirling snow. I should have been exhausted, but adrenaline hummed through me like an electric current. For the first time in months, I felt awake, truly awake, like every mile was carrying me further from the web of lies Ryan had spun. When I walked into my apartment just after midnight, the place felt different. The framed engagement photos on the hallway table looked almost absurd now, like props from a play whose run had abruptly ended. I slipped off my coat, stared at the pictures for a long moment, then carefully turned them face down. Not destroyed, just paused, like I was saving the ending for myself. My phone lit up with a string of messages from Ryan. Ryan, where are you? Ryan, we need to talk. Ryan, please answer me. Ryan, I can explain. I let the screen go dark. By morning, the texts had turned into missed calls, 11 of them. I brewed coffee, watched the gray December sky lighten over the skyline, and thought about what came next. Revenge wasn't just about the confrontation. It was about what followed. And I wasn't done. Around 9, the doorbell rang. My stomach tightened even before I checked the peephole. Ryan stood there, hair disheveled, eyes frantic. For a fleeting second, I saw the man I'd loved, the one who once spent an entire night making me soup when I was sick. But memory is a tricky comfort. I opened the door only enough to let my words through. You shouldn't be here. Emily, please, he said, voice cracking. Let me in. We need to talk. I stepped back but didn't invite him to sit. Talk then. He hovered in the entryway like a guilty teenager. I messed up, he began. I didn't know how to tell you about my parents. They can be intense. They always have expectations. I wanted to keep our life separate so we could start fresh. I crossed my arms. Separate? You mean hidden? You told them you were single. You told me they wouldn't come to the wedding. His jaw tightened. I was trying to avoid the pressure, the comparisons. He stopped, searching for words that might soften the edges. They have money. They judge people. I almost laughed. So you lied to everyone? That's your excuse? His shoulders slumped. I thought I could fix it before the wedding. I thought if I proposed first, if I kept things calm, they'd come around. By erasing me? I asked. By making me a ghost? He reached out, but I stepped back. Emily, I love you. Please, don't throw this away. Something inside me cooled to steel. You threw it away the moment you decided I wasn't worthy of the truth. He flinched, the words landing like a slap. I can change, he whispered. You already did, I said quietly. Into someone I don't recognize. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the city noise muffled by the thick winter glass. Finally, he lowered his gaze. Is this it, then? This, I said, opening the door wider to the hallway, is me choosing myself. He hesitated, then stepped out. The door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the apartment. The days that followed felt strangely weightless. I boxed up the engagement ring and mailed it back to his condo with a short note. Truth is heavier than gold. I deleted our shared wedding spreadsheet. I blocked his number, then unblocked it, not out of weakness, but because I wanted to read the messages that would inevitably follow. They did, trickling in like rain, apologies, explanations, promises. I ignored everyone. Meanwhile, the Westons kept calling. Evelyn left warm voicemails inviting me to visit, insisting I was family no matter what. Clara texted memes to make me laugh and updates about the fallout. Apparently, Ryan had driven back to Lake Geneva the next day to face his parents' fury. Mom's livid, Clara wrote. Dad says he's never seen her so angry. Part of me wanted to disappear, to let their family heal without my shadow. But another part, the part that had tasted the power of truth, wanted to be present. Not out of spite, but because they had treated me with more honesty in one night than Ryan had in 2 years. The weekend after New Year's, Evelyn invited me for a quiet lunch. Just the three of us, me, Thomas, and you, she said over the phone. No drama. We'd simply like to see you. I almost said no. Then I thought about how Ryan had tried to erase me and how the Westons had embraced me anyway. I'd love that, I said. Lake Geneva was frozen solid when I arrived, the surface of the water a sheet of pearl under a pale sun. Evelyn greeted me at the door with a hug that smelled of lavender and hearth smoke. Thomas followed, his handshake warm and steady, over bowls of butternut squash soup. They apologized, not for their own actions, but for their sons. We raised him better than this, Thomas said, his voice heavy. We can't excuse it. I shook my head. You don't owe me an apology? He made his choices. Evelyn reached across the table, her eyes kind. Still, you deserve the truth from the start. Please know our door is always open to you, whether or not Ryan is in the picture. Something loosened in my chest. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed that closure until it came. After lunch, Evelyn pressed a small envelope into my hand. Inside was a simple card with her number, Thomas's number, and a handwritten note. You are welcome here anytime. Family isn't only about blood. Driving home, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a chapter closing. Not the explosive movie-style revenge I once imagined, but something deeper. I hadn't needed to scream or destroy. I'd only needed to reveal the truth and stand in it until the lies crumbled. A week later, a final message from Ryan arrived in my inbox. Emily, I know I can't undo what I did. I'm starting therapy. I'm sorry for every lie. I hope someday you'll forgive me. I read it once, then archived it without reply. Forgiveness might come someday, but it would be mine to choose. On my timeline, not his. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stood by my window, watching the city glow against the January sky. Below, people hurried through the cold, their lives intersecting in brief, bright moments. I thought of the Westons, of Clara's easy laughter, of Evelyn's quiet strength. I thought of the life I was building, one where my worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's courage. Revenge, I realized, hadn't been about humiliating Ryan. It was about reclaiming myself. About walking into a room full of strangers and owning the truth he'd tried to bury. About proving, to him, to his parents, but mostly to myself, that I would never again shrink to fit someone else's fear. I raised my glass to the city, to the lake, to the woman I'd become, to Emily, whole, unhidden, free. By February, the snow along Lake Michigan had started to melt into slush, but the cold air still carried a clean edge that matched how I felt inside, clear, crisp, and brand new. 6 weeks had passed since the Christmas confrontation, and every day since had widened the distance between the woman who tiptoed around Ryan's lies and the one who now walked straight through her own life. People kept asking if I'd heard from him again. My friends at work, even Clara sometimes, would tilt their heads and ask carefully, like they were probing a sore tooth. The truth was, Ryan had sent a few scattered texts, apologies that felt rehearsed, fragments of explanations I'd already heard. I never answered. Forgiveness wasn't on the table, not because I wanted to punish him, but because forgiveness is a door you open when you're ready to share a room again. And I was building an entirely different house. I filled my evenings with things I'd put off while planning a wedding that would never happen. I joined a pottery class in Pilsen, my hands learning the patient weight of clay. I took long night walks along the lakefront, the city lights bending across the water like neon ribbons. I even booked a solo trip to Portland, something I'd once daydreamed about but always postponed for when Ryan and I have time. It wasn't all triumphant montages. There were quiet moments, morning coffee, a half-emptied closet, when I felt the echo of what I'd lost. But even in the lonely spaces, there was no regret. Only relief. The kind of relief that settles in when you realize the danger has already passed and you are still standing. Clara and I kept in touch more than I expected. We started as co-conspirators and somehow slid into friendship. Sometimes she'd send photos of the lake iced over, or random updates about her own dating misadventures. One snowy Saturday, we met halfway for brunch in Milwaukee. Over pancakes and black coffee, she said, "I still can't believe you showed up that night. You walked in like you owned the room." I smiled, remembering the hush that had fallen over the Westons' living room, the way Ryan's lies unraveled in the warm light of their Christmas tree. It wasn't about owning anything, I told her. It was about finally being seen. Evelyn emailed me a few times too. Short notes, warm and steady. "Thinking of you. Come visit when the lilacs bloom." She never mentioned Ryan. I liked her more for that. One Friday evening in late February, as the first hints of spring softened the air, I stopped by a small gallery opening downtown. The space buzzed with quiet conversation and the smell of oil paint. I wandered between canvases, wineglass in hand, when a woman about my age stepped beside me. She was tall, with a quick smile and a leather jacket that looked perfectly worn in. "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" she said, nodding toward a stormy abstract. "Yeah," I replied, studying the sweep of blues and grays. "It feels honest." We talked for a while, about art, music, the best late-night diners in the city. Her name was Harper. There was an ease to her presence, a grounded confidence I recognized like a chord I'd heard before. When she asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, I said yes without overthinking it. Walking home later, the night air cool on my skin, I realized how different that yes felt. It wasn't a desperate leap into someone else's life. It was an invitation to keep building my own. A few days later, I received one final email from Ryan. No pleading this time, just a simple line. "Emily, I hope you're doing well. I'm working on myself. I know I broke something I can't fix, but I'm grateful you showed me who I really was. I wish you every happiness. I read it twice, then let it sit in my inbox. I didn't need to reply. Some stories don't need epilogues. Spring crept in slowly. The pottery class ended with a small exhibition. I sold a vase for $50 and celebrated with takeout sushi. I spent weekends exploring neighborhoods I'd always driven past. I learned the pleasure of my own company, the quiet joy of choosing a movie on a rainy night, of waking up to a day shaped entirely by me. One bright April afternoon, I drove back to Lake Geneva to see Evelyn and Thomas. The ice had vanished from the lake, leaving the water a soft, endless blue. The Weston house stood warm and open, a place that now held no ghosts. We shared lemonade on the porch, talking about travel and gardens and nothing heavy. Not once did Ryan's name come up. Before I left, Evelyn squeezed my hand. "You know," she said gently, "family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people who show up and stay honest." I hugged her, feeling the truth of it settle deep. On the drive home, windows down, wind tangling my hair, I thought about revenge, the word that had fueled so many sleepless nights. I'd imagined it as fire, as spectacle, as the dramatic collapse of a man's carefully built life. But standing in the quiet after everything, I understood something else. Revenge wasn't the explosion. It was the reconstruction. It was living fully, without apology, after someone tried to shrink you. I wasn't the woman who crept through Instagram feeds at midnight anymore. I wasn't the fiancé waiting for scraps of honesty. I was Emily, no aliases, no shadows. Whole, visible, unhidden. As Chicago's skyline came into view, I felt the subtle certainty of a new chapter. Not about Ryan, not even about the Westons, but about me. About the life that had been waiting all along, patient and wide as the lake. I rolled down the window a little further, let the cold air rush in, and smiled. I was free. The first warm days of May always feel like a quiet miracle in Chicago. Tulips pushed through the soil and sidewalk planters, the smell of lake water lost its icy edge, and the city seemed to exhale. I walked down Michigan Avenue one evening with no destination, the sunset spilling copper light between the buildings. For the first time in a long while, my mind wasn't replaying old conversations or rehearsing what-ifs. This was life after the storm, steady, unhurried, mine. A few weeks earlier, I'd finished the last of the practical tasks. I'd closed the joint savings account Ryan and I once kept for the wedding, sold the dress I'd secretly bought, and donated the crystal champagne flutes we'd picked out together. Each step had felt like sliding a heavy stone off my chest. When the final box was gone, I sat on my empty living room floor, sunlight warming the hardwood, and realized there was nothing left of him in my home. Or in me. Clara visited that weekend, bringing a bottle of red wine and a stack of Polaroids from her latest hiking trip. We laughed until midnight, trading stories about ridiculous dating apps and her parents' stubborn rose bushes. She caught me smiling at nothing in particular and said, "You look free." "I am," I replied. And I meant it. Ryan never called again. Not a text, not an email. I learned through Clara that he'd taken a job in Seattle and started therapy in earnest. The knowledge didn't stir anger or longing, just a calm acceptance. We were two people who had once collided and now lived on different coasts, different timelines. I kept in touch with Evelyn and Thomas. In June, I spent a weekend at their lake house, now a place of quiet friendship rather than painful memory. We drank lemonade on the porch and talked about summer gardens and travel plans. There was no mention of Ryan. There didn't need to be. They were part of my story now, but not because of him. Life kept moving forward. Harper, the woman I'd met at the gallery, became a gentle constant. We explored farmers' markets, shared playlists, and sat on the lakefront at midnight talking about music and art. Whether it turned into something deeper didn't matter. What mattered was that every step with her, and with anyone new, was chosen freely, not out of fear or need. One evening, as we watched a soft pink sunset bleed across the water, Harper asked, If you could go back, would you change anything? I thought about the lies, the humiliation, the icy Christmas night. Then I shook my head. No, I said. That whole mess is how I found myself. How I learned to stop shrinking. Revenge, I'd once believed, would look like fireworks, like the world watching him fall. But standing there in the warm twilight, I finally understood what my revenge truly was. It was living without apology. It was choosing my own voice over silence. It was a life bigger and brighter than the one he tried to control. The night settled around us, the city lights flickering on one by one. I breathed in the scent of the lake and smiled, knowing the past was no longer a wound, but a story I'd outgrown. This was the ending I had claimed for myself. Not a blaze of anger, but the quiet, unstoppable freedom of a woman who refused to disappear. And that, more than any confrontation, any plan, was the sweetest revenge of all.